So I'm so excited today. I went and saw the movie First Man last week, I guess, and it was a very ambitious film. Uh, I'll share with you some of my thoughts, but I really wanted to talk to somebody that knows something about all of this, the space travel stuff. So I thought it'd be fun to have my friend Richard on the podcast, who is very informed on this. And we actually previously talked about Apollo 13, October Sky, and The Right Stuff. So we're I didn't realize that we'd done so many space movies, but Richard, thanks for coming on the podcast and talking about First Man.
Hey, that's all right. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, thanks. So, so this is our Damien Chazelle biopic about Neil Armstrong. So this, certainly had a lot of hype around it, some controversy that we'll talk about.
Mm-hmm.
And, but overall, what was your sort of response to this film?
Well, it certainly wasn't what I was expecting. I mean, I was expecting just quite a basic retelling of the story, and instead Damien Chazelle had this quite particular style that he brought to it to make it all about Neil and some of the particular themes in his journey. I think most notably death, and they're making sure to cover the most important bits in his spaceflight career. Yeah, and
you have read the book that this is based on, correct?
Yeah. Yes, that's right.
And what do you think of the book?
I do like the book. It's very detailed. It's a biography, so it's not written by Armstrong himself, but he was interviewed, as well as a lot of other people for it, and so there's a lot of technical detail in there. But even like with all the interviewing, it's kind of hard to get into Armstrong's mind sometimes. The author kind of comments on that. He was a very reserved person who didn't give much away. I read a little book that said he liked to talk about ideas more than he liked to talk about people.
Oh, that's interesting. Because that was one of the things that most surprised me, I guess, about the movie, is that I was expecting him to have more charisma, be more, not that, I don't know. I was just surprised because I don't know if I had seen interviews, if I was just getting him and other people like John Glenn and Buzz Aldrin, getting them confused with him. That, I don't know, I thought that he was more charismatic than they portrayed in the movie.
He did have some moments of charisma. He did have something of a sense of humor which didn't quite come across sometimes in the film, like after he'd landed on the moon, he and Buzz Aldrin was getting out of the lunar module. They had a little joke about Aldrin making sure he didn't shut the hatch on his way out and lock them out.
Oh, right.
Yeah. And I think he made a joke once that he didn't exercise very much because you only get a finite number of heartbeats and he wasn't going to waste them on exercise.
Right.
So basically people say in the book, I've been rereading the book before we have this video, and he basically said that once you got to know him, he was a good friend, and he was quite nice to talk to, but he didn't make that much casual conversation, and he was generally quite quiet and most of that talk about technical things.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't a big fan of the movie. I felt like it's not just that he was reserved, which was surprising, but I could have been fine with, but I felt like you didn't really see a whole lot of growth in his character. You didn't see a whole lot of emotional sort of change and journey from his character. He stayed, in my opinion, fairly flat the entire film. And there was a little bit of emotion with the death of his daughter, but even with those, I don't know, I didn't get enough sort of expression, enough emotion that I felt like I was connected to his character.
Hey, I can't see what you mean about it being kind of hard to see how he grows throughout the film. I suppose obviously we're okay talking about spoilers in this video, but I suppose the main bit of growth he has is at the end where he takes his daughter's bracelet to the moon and leaves it there, which I guess kind of symbolizes him managing to let go of a death that's been weighing on him.
Uh-huh.
I suppose you kind of see that impacting him throughout the film, and as he starts experiencing more death among his co-workers. But I guess his personality remains the same, and I think that's probably how it was in real life as well.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was wondering, I felt like there were times when the movie was trying to show that he was on the spectrum a little bit in his social skills and some of even some like tics that he had and different things and I kind of I was curious. One of my friends said on Twitter that his son had said that he did have Asperger's. Have you heard anything like that?
I did actually have a look at it after I'd seen your comments on Twitter and your review. It didn't look like anybody really seriously investigated it. I couldn't find any actual quotes from either of his sons about whether he was, but he said he seemed to have traits along those lines.
Yeah.
So it is possible.
Mm-hmm. Okay, interesting. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, it starts out with him in 1961 flying the X-15 rocket plane.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a rocket plane.
And basically what happens in that situation, like it bounced off the atmosphere, which caused it to
problem. Basically, what happened was I think he got up to I can't remember the exact altitude, but when he was coming back down towards 140,000 feet, and in the book he mentions he had tried pulling the nose up a little bit to kind of investigate the force of gravity at that height, and that was what caused him to start going up when he should have been kind of continuing to go down. And so he had to struggle to control, ended up landing off target.
Okay. Did he work with the people from The Right Stuff? I can't remember.
He would have, yeah. He worked at the same place, Edwards Air Force Base in California, but there was a nice big desert in Salt Lake for them to land their planes on.
Right.
Yeah, he was working on there at the time he became an astronaut.
Do you know what is it say in the book? Kind of what inspired him to get into the whole space program?
Basically, it was a career step for him. He basically the opportunity had come up. And he was first and foremost a test pilot and engineer. All the astronauts were test pilots at that point, and so he was just kind of weighing up his options about where he wanted to go, whether he wanted to continue flying the X-15, or try this other program that ultimately didn't go ahead, or go into the space program. And he decided the space program seemed the most interesting and the most exciting, so he went for that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I wish there had been a little bit more. I don't know, like I love the moment in Apollo 13 where Tom Hanks's character Jim Lovell, right?
Yeah, Jim Lovell.
Yeah, Jim Lovell. He puts his thumb over the moon, and he talks about his dream of going to the moon, and then of course then you get the great callback later on when he puts his thumb over the Earth, and I wish there had been more moments like that to get like a sense of sort of his personality or to get a sense of his dreams and what he like, the awe, and I don't know, just more of that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I can understand that. I mean, his main passion was for engineering and flying, basically. So it would be nice to kind of make that a bit clearer in the film. I mean, you do see him like talking about how the details of like Space Rendezvous, and you see the main reason times where he looks quite happy in the film is after he's pulled something off in his flights, like when he manages to dock on Gemini 8 and after he manages the landing on Apollo 11.
Mm-hmm.
That's what he enjoyed, the challenge of that.
Yeah.
So I can understand what you mean. It would have been nice to make that a bit clearer, but I still liked the overall performance by Ryan Gosling. It was generally quite a subtle performance.
Yeah.
He had to kind of be true to what Armstrong's personality was like, and that meant being quite stoic a lot of the time, except for these moments of emotion that are quite leave quite an impression when they actually do come.
Yeah. I mean, I think he did a good job with what was asked of him. Mm-hmm. And maybe, I don't know, it's a tough thing because you ride that line between making an entertaining movie versus telling the truth. You know, that's a hard question to answer. But I don't know, I guess I prefer my biopics to be a little more like And some people might think a movie like Hidden Figures is sort of bland, because or more pedestrian, doesn't take like the artistic risks that this film takes. But I just felt so much more inspired and so much more excited and after seeing Hidden Figures than this. And I don't know, I guess I like in my biopics to be for them to be a little cheesy, a little bit inspirational, a little bit, I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, I can understand that. I guess that maybe Damien Chazelle thought that had already been done with things like Apollo 13, and there
Yeah.
was also this there was this mini series in 1998 called From the Earth to the Moon, which covered the entire Apollo program, including Apollo 11,
Mm,
and hey, and that kind of went for the whole inspirational tone as well.
yeah.
And in that film, Armstrong was actually played by this actor called Tony Goldwyn, who was, I think, did the voice for Tarzan in the Disney film.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
And it was a similar type of portrayal or more of the
I think
different?
I think maybe there was a little more charisma to him there, but he was generally the same kind of character.
Mm,
Like in
interesting.
the hey, like in that mini series, there's a scene like in the how in this one there's a scene where he's flying this lunar landing training vehicle, and he ends up crashing and has to eject.
Mm.
Like in the mini series, they show that, and everyone's running up to it, like seeing if he's okay, and he just kind of walks away without saying a word, just like showing a bit of discomfort here because he bit his tongue.
Oh,
Yeah, and
do you,
that was his only injury from that ejection, that he bit in his tongue.
okay. Do you remember, is Neil Armstrong, is he in The Right Stuff
He's not, no,
portrayed? Okay. No.
no,
Okay.
because he was in the Right Stuff is all about the Mercury 7, the first group of astronauts,
Okay.
and he was actually in the second group called the New Nine, and Jim Lovell was actually chosen in that group as well.
Mm. Okay. Okay. That makes sense. So from what I've read, the movie is pretty accurate as far as the timeline of
Yeah,
things. From what I read, that he did have a 2-year-old daughter who passed away
yeah,
and of a brain tumor.
that's right. That was in January 1962, which was actually his and Janet's wedding anniversary.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah,
And this was his first wife, correct? Janet?
that's right. Yeah, yeah. So they ended up divorcing in 1994, and then he got remarried.
Okay.
Uh,
And what did you think of Claire Foy in the role of Janet?
I really liked her as well. She kind of got all the, like you say, she did everything she was asked to do.
Yeah.
Kind of getting the impression of kind of the struggles of being married to this guy who has this very risky job and also doesn't really open up very much.
Yeah.
I mean, you can see this like all the struggles that Marilyn Lovell has to go through in Apollo 13. At least she has a kind of more open relationship with her husband.
Yeah. I mean, I think that the women in The Right Stuff were better, and I think that I like the performance in Apollo 13 better. But she did everything that she was asked to do. I didn't think that her and Ryan Gosling had very good chemistry,
Yeah.
and I guess there's supposed to be some tension there, but I don't know.
Yeah.
Even with tension, I feel like you can have chemistry more than they did. But I think that it was very powerful, the scene where she, forces him to talk to the kids. I like
Yeah,
really
that
good.
was a good scene. That yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's obviously devastating to lose a child,
Oh,
and you could
yeah.
definitely feel, I think that is the one part that felt emotionally true to me,
Mm.
whereas a lot of the other stuff just kind of lay flat for me,
Yeah.
but the things involving the daughter definitely rang true.
Yeah, it's just like when he's crying afterwards, and then when he has these like visions of her through the film, doesn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. One thing I wondered, and maybe this is a stupid question, but wouldn't the bracelet have floated from zero gravity?
Hey, it's not zero gravity on the moon. It's 1/6 of Earth's gravity.
Oh, okay.
So like you can jump quite much higher than you would on Earth. But but I think a very light object like that, it would just come to rest.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So that's why I was wondering, because it's like the flag has to be like, obviously a flag is gonna be implanted, but like I
Yeah.
just didn't know if it would
Yeah.
float if it'll float.
Yeah.
That's
There's a
interesting.
lot, yeah, a lot of people who say that they say say that they think the moon landings were fake will say that they can see the flag waving in the videos, but really it's being held up by a pole and it only moves when the astronauts are touching it.
Uh-huh.
So yeah, that
Okay.
yeah, so that's why it stands up.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, the conspiracy theorists that they claim that Stanley Kubrick directed it, which is
That's right. Yeah,
yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
You ever seen the film Capricorn One?
Uh-uh.
Yeah, it's about this moon landing to Mars that gets faked, and they think it was like along those lines.
Oh,
Yeah,
interesting. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So so you liked how they portrayed the initial X-15 rocket plane
I
thing?
did. Yeah, it was quite overwhelming to just to begin the film with that when there's so much noise coming at you.
Yeah,
I felt really kind of overwhelmed by the noise
yeah,
and
yeah.
and, and the amount
It
of shaking as well.
yeah, it definitely made me nauseous, this movie,
Yeah,
but I'm very, more sensitive than most, but it was pretty shaky.
yeah. Did Gravity have that effect on you?
What's
As
that?
in did the film Gravity have that effect on you? Because I know a lot of people felt motion sick from that.
Yeah, but Gravity, the thing that they did that was so smart is that it's pretty short. I forget how, uh, so it wasn't quite as.
Yeah, I think it's mostly the spinning at the beginning when the debris first hits the shuttle, isn't it? And Sandra Bullock goes flying off into space and she's spinning then.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
Gravity's only 91 minutes, and
it
so
is.
I
Yeah,
think that helps it a lot as opposed to this one that is much longer, 141 minutes.
yeah,
So, but I made it through. I just don't think it like thrills me maybe as much as others because I am having those things. But yeah, Gravity, when she's just like floating and like some of those scenes were so real. I was just like, whoa, I don't know, it was incredible.
yeah,
And I feel like some of those scenes you're allowed to sort of linger in it just a teeny bit more than some of these, which were very fast and very intense, which is
yeah.
appropriate because it's different things they're recreating, more creating. But yeah, it definitely started off with a bang. And I think the flight sequences of the various kinds were probably the best part, even though I got a little nauseous. They were probably the best part of the movie, I think.
Yeah, yeah, I definitely love those because it really put you there in a way that I don't think any other space film has.
Yeah.
Like seeing through Armstrong's eyes when he's walking up to his Gemini spacecraft and just you can just see it, the kind of metal looking a bit corroded and just this little seat inside.
Yeah.
It just all looks quite crude and and then and then there's just because when it actually takes off, there's no music, is there? There is in the Apollo 11 launch, but not on the Gemini launch. All you've got is just the sound of the rocket taking off. Oh,
Yeah. Yeah.
it was just really, I just thought there was really great cinematography in this film.
Yeah. Oh, no doubt
Yeah.
about it, for sure. It did a really, really, really good job with that. And all pretty much all the production design was top notch.
Oh yeah.
It looked really authentic and real. And I
Yeah.
don't know.
Yeah, most of it was accurate. There were just like a few very small inaccuracies here and there. Like when he's walking to the Gemini, and you see the Agena, the thing they have to dock with in orbit. You see that taking off as he's walking to the Gemini. He was actually already inside the spacecraft at that point.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but there's just little things like that.
Yeah. Yeah. So so he applies for Project Gemini.
Yeah,
Just he sees it as like the next step in his career. It's not like
yeah,
a
yeah.
big dream of his to go to space.
No, I don't think it really was his. I don't think it really was his dream because he didn't really think that the space flight was going to become a thing in his lifetime at the time when he was like in his teens and his early 20s. And
Mm-hmm.
not like Jim Lovell because Jim Lovell was very into rockets from an early age, and so he definitely really wanted to do something like that.
Mm-hmm.
He
Yeah.
only ended up becoming a pilot because he didn't really see much job opportunities for a rocket scientist.
Right. Right. So then they go to Houston, and then they meet Elliot C.
Yeah,
and Ed White.
yeah, that's right. There's two of the other astronauts in the new nine that joined along with him.
Yeah, and so they became pretty close friends.
Yeah, I remember
And
I was gonna say the scene where they're trying out the spinning simulator and everyone's been sick afterwards. That was one of the times that people in the theatre were laughing because there's not that many funny moments in this film, but
yeah,
that was the scene that people thought was funny.
yeah. So this is Jason Clarke and Patrick Fugit.
Mm.
And how do you how do you think how do you think they portrayed some of these other periphery characters, these side
Yeah.
characters?
I felt that for the side characters suffered a little bit, but in expense of Neil and Jelly because there was so much focus on them.
Uh-huh.
Like Carl Chandler's character, Deke
Mm.
Slayton, who was in charge of the astronaut office, it kind of took me a while to really be quite sure who he was. But,
I don't think they did a very good job with making it feel like a team thing. Like when I don't know, like in Apollo 13, you're just so like rooting for all of this whole team of NASA, and you know, when they create that um filter, whatever it is,
yeah,
like that's such a like yes, woohoo,
yeah.
and that's such an exciting moment. And this is like going to the moon. There had to been more of like a team. This wasn't just one person. This was
Exactly, yeah.
the whole team. Like I
Yeah.
wish they had done like a better job. And I mean, even in Apollo 13, I think the journey of the Gary Sinise character is like more of an emotional arc, even though he's not in it all that much, than we get from any side character in this movie, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, it is just a decision to focus on Neil the way they do and his wife. And I would have liked it. I decided to be have a little more expansion in that way.
Yeah, especially because they're the loss of the of you know of various people through the movie is so like impactful, but because you don't really know them, or it feels somewhat clinical as opposed to emotional to
Yeah.
me.
But you do get to know Ed White quite a bit well. I think just that if you get quite a few scenes between him and Neil. I mean, Elliot C. You don't really get to know very much
Mm-hmm.
what he does.
Yeah.
There is actually don't remember the trailer, but there was a scene of a fire at a house you got cast, and that's in the book where the Armstrongs had a house fire,
Right.
and Ed White actually helped them there because he lived next door. So
So,
that
uh,
doesn't cut from the film.
yeah. So they didn't have a ton of Buzz Aldrin, which is a shame because I love Corey Stoll. He's one of my favorite actors.
Yeah,
I think he is so handsome. I really like him, and I I wish they had had a few more because I felt like they were kind of trying to portray him as a bit of a jerk,
yeah,
more
they were
likable.
a little bit. Yeah, I mean, I think from what I've heard of Aldrin, he was he could quite be quite outspoken, and he wasn't the most popular astronaut.
Uh-huh.
In fact, when Armstrong was being given his crew for Apollo 11, he was told, "You don't have to take Buzz if you don't want to." And
Uh-huh.
Armstrong thought, "Oh, no, it's okay. I'll be able to work with him." And so and I would have, and I think they could have used if they had included a bit more things, then they could have used that as side of Aldrin's personality a bit better. Like there was a bit of an argument about whether he and or Neil was going to be first to get out of the lunar module and walk on the moon, and that could have, and what we see of him before then could have led up to that quite well.
Yeah. Yeah, I would have loved to have seen more of that because I don't know, I've always thought of Buzz Aldrin as this sweet, cute old man. So I would have liked to
Yeah,
have kind of seen more about that side of his personality
yeah,
that I was unaware of because I'm
yeah,
not as well informed.
yeah.
And
I saw him
yeah.
at a book signing a couple of years ago.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he gave a lecture. He said he came across as quite a nice old man there.
Yeah.
He
Right.
he did have quite some serious problems after Apollo 11. He had a bit of a drinking problem and depression,
Oh,
problems with his family. So he had quite a lot to work through, and but he came out the other side
uh-huh.
fairly stable.
Yeah. Interesting. Um, and they don't you don't get to know the third Michael,
No,
the
Michael Collins, yeah.
yeah, third member of the crew at all.
No, he's barely even there. He's just basically in the background, isn't he?
And I would have loved to have known how he came up with the idea of one small step for man, one giant
Yeah,
leap for mankind. We never found that out.
yeah. He just kind of apparently, I think that most sources I've read said that he came up with it while he was on the moon. He hadn't really thought about it that much, even though people were kind of pressuring him to think of something. But I think but I think Neil's brother said that they'd been playing Risk one night before the launch, and
Uh-huh.
he'd said then he was going to do it. I think he just come up with this idea that that he'd be taking a small step, but it was going to be a significant one.
Yeah, I think something like that would have been nice. Just
Mm.
anything to kind of humanize him a little more. He just felt a little robotic to me. He wasn't like I didn't feel that connection to him that I wanted. And I would have like even if you're not 100% real, because let's be honest, most of our lives are kind of boring. And so when you make a movie about our lives, and especially someone like Neil Armstrong, like that's what movies need to do is they need to add a little bit of flower, a little bit of color, to in order to make it an interesting movie.
Yeah,
At least that's what I think.
yeah.
Um, I don't know.
Yeah, I can understand that. I mean, I suppose it is quite difficult with the kind of personality that he had. They didn't give
Yeah.
much away. I suppose a lot of drive just comes from his relationship with his wife and the actual things that he was doing, rather than really getting into his psyche because it was quite hard to do that. And so some bits they had to speculate a bit.
Yeah. So he was originally he was planned to go on Gemini 8,
Yeah, that's right. He flew on Gemini 8. That was his first mission.
and then that's when C and Charles Bassett are killed in T-38 crash.
Yeah, that's right. They were going to fly on Gemini 9.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, Gemini 9. Okay.
yeah,
And then Gemini 8 is him and
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 Dave Scott. Yeah,
Nick Scott. Uh in the T30, yeah, T30, oh sorry, and they dock with the Agena target vehicle. What
yeah.
was that? What was
That's
that?
basically it's basically a little rocket that they would just get sent into orbit with the express intention of being a docking target for the Gemini.
So what happens in this scene? It was a lot to take in. So they dock successfully, and then it gets caught in some kind of tide pool, but in the space.
Basically, a thruster on the Gemini had gotten stuck on, and so it was pushing them constantly. And at first, they thought the problem was with the Agena because the Agena had quite a lot of problems in the past, and so they undock there, and then the rolling just gets faster, and they realise the problem is with the Gemini, and so eventually the roll got to more than one revolution per second, at which point their vision was becoming blurred, and they were close to blacking out.
Uh-huh.
And then Armstrong, the only thing Armstrong to do was to turn off the main thrusters, and then activate these backup thrusters that were supposed to be used for re-entry. And once he did that, he was able to bring the spacecraft under control. But because he had activated those thrusters, mission rules said that they had to come back to Earth immediately. So the mission was over at that point.
Okay. All right. I was a little confused about what was going on. I'm like, why are they spinning? Is it some kind of other thing? I don't know. I didn't quite get it, but that's interesting. So he's a, he is he returns home after that, and people are pretty critical after that. Like there was a
Yeah.
lot of protests and stuff. Like, what did you think of how that was portrayed?
Hey, I thought that was pretty accurate.
Mm-hmm.
The astronaut office was very competitive, and so people would be willing to point out if they thought somebody else had made a mistake. Like in The Right Stuff, you remember how Gus Grissom's Mercury mission, the hatch comes off and he almost drowns, and he says it just blew by itself, and people are a bit unwilling to believe that.
Uh-huh.
It was sort of like that here, except most people thought that Armstrong did everything he could. If he could potentially have taken another option to use the Agena to bring the spacecraft under control, but that wasn't how he'd been trained. That wasn't how he'd been trained.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then
I think Gene Kranz, the flight director for Apollo 13, he said something like, like the crew reacted as they were trained, and they reacted wrong because they were trained wrong.
Oh, okay, interesting. So, was there a lot of protests at the time against the space program? I've never. I mean, there's always protests, but I didn't realize it was like a big thing.
Hey, I think there were always some people who were opposed to spending so much money on the space program, particularly after what we see of the Apollo 1 fire.
Uh-huh.
There was people who wanted to, after 3 astronauts were killed, there was people who wanted to abandon the whole thing at that point.
Uh-huh. Yeah. So that's what happens next is they're having a plugs out test. What's a plugs out test?
That basically means the astronauts will get into the spacecraft, the hatch will be sealed, it will be pressurized as it would be before an actual launch, and the plugs that were connecting the spacecraft to the ground will be removed, so it will be operating on its own power.
Okay. And Neil is gone because he's at the White House.
He is, yeah. Jim Lovell was actually there as well that night. I think the astronaut that Neil you see speaking to at that event, I think that was supposed to be Jim Lovell. But again, the film doesn't really make that clear.
Okay. And and so something happens with the paint, or not paint, but the covering of this Gemini thing, the ship, that it catches fire.
Yeah,
right?
The ship had been kind of rushed into production, and because there was a big rush to get to meet Kennedy's deadline of putting a man on the moon before the end of the decade. And the astronauts weren't really happy with this Apollo spacecraft they've been given, because there were quite a few defects with it. And the thing that caused the fire was basically a spark from some exposed wiring. And the problem was the spacecraft had been pressurized with pure oxygen. And so that spark created a whole inferno. In just 15 seconds after the astronauts first mentioned there was a fire, the fire had grown so intense that the hull of the spacecraft actually ruptured.
Yeah. I mean, it's obviously a huge tragedy and was very sad, but I would have felt more if I knew the characters more. Like, I don't know, I just feel like these other movies, Hidden Figures, Apollo 13, right, The Right Stuff, these other movies we've talked about all had me more connected to these side characters, and so it would have been way more devastating.
Yeah. I think the scene kind of probably worked best for me because I knew what was going to happen. When Ed White and the other 2 astronauts were inside the spacecraft, I was kind of waiting for the fire to start.
It was very well done, though. It looked so real. Like it looked hot. You almost felt hot watching it. It was very
I thought it was a bit weird that the judge just showed the hatch and the smoke coming from behind it, because what you couldn't see was, like, on the gantry there were quite a lot of crew members there, and once they realized there was an emergency, they were all trying to get the astronauts out and do something. And then when the hull actually ruptured and there were flames coming out, a lot of them got burned, and it was like a good few minutes before they were able to get to the hatch and get it open, by which time the crew had suffocated from the smoke, because
they're just all too far away to just open it.
Well, it was a difficult hatch to open because it opened inwards, and the atmosphere was pressurized, so it was effectively sealing the hatch shut.
Oh, okay.
So it was quite difficult to open anyway because it came in 2 parts, and that was one thing that was redesigned afterwards, as Jim Lovell explains to his son in Apollo 13.
Oh, yeah. So then he has this training accident.
Yeah.
What exactly happened there? He's thrown along the ground by the moon rover, right?
It's a vehicle called the Lunar Landing Training Vehicle, the LLTV, which was used to kind of simulate what it would be like to land a lunar module on the moon, because there wasn't really any other way to do it on Earth. Well, they tried with helicopters, but that wasn't really a very good simulation. And he basically, again, it wasn't really his fault. It was kind of an engineering problem that caused him to lose control of it, and he had to eject. And I think there was an estimation that if he'd waited 2/5 of a second longer, his parachute would have been too late to save him. But in real life, he wasn't quite as badly scratched up as he was in the film. He just bit his tongue.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. So obviously his wife sees that, freaks out.
Yeah.
What? And because he's not been communicating at all about
No.
the risks or what he's experiencing at all. And that would be incredibly hard. They have another child during this time as well.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
they,
they have two sons called Eric and Mark. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Interesting. And there were some nice moments, I thought, the between Janet and the neighbor, one of the wives
Yeah.
of
Pat
the
White, Ed White's wife. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I
Yeah.
thought there were some nice scenes with
Yeah.
that.
I thought it was it was very well done scene after Ed has died, and you can see her just standing by the car with all those newspapers just lying around. She's just not knowing what to do.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was good. That was really good. So then he's selected to be in Apollo 11, and that it will be the first lunar landing.
Hmm.
And then we get the scene with Janet forcing him to talk to his sons about the risks of the flight.
Yeah.
And how did you like that? That's
I thought that was one of the more powerful scenes where she ends up kind of shouting at him, almost like in frustration, trying to get through to him. Yeah. Like I say, how important it is to their boys to understand. Yeah. But there is a kind of a brief mention of it in the book that she did ask him to do that because there was a chance he wasn't coming back. But I don't think she was actually party to the conversation that they had, and she wasn't sure how much he said.
uh-huh.
The boys were 12 and 7 at the time, so they didn't really remember that much about it.
Yeah, in the article I read, it said I guess they worked with Damien Chazelle for 2.5 years on a lot of these details, and they didn't remember the specifics of the conversation, but that he said that scene came from us, so
Yeah.
that they did. So that's interesting. And he says, I didn't have any doubt that he was coming back, so so he wouldn't have asked him if he is coming back like he does in the movie. And he says, we think we're coming back, but there is some risk, is basically what Armstrong told his sons. With regard to the oldest son shaking his father's hand at the end of the conversation that was added by the filmmakers, Rick said that it could have happened, or maybe it was a hug. He wasn't sure.
Right.
I think I would have rather have been a hug. Just a little
Yeah,
more warmth, a little more,
it would have been nice. Yeah.
Yeah, it would
Yeah, I
have been
did see a
better.
couple of I did see a couple of like videos where they interviewed his sons. They seemed
Uh-huh.
generally happy with how he was portrayed in the film.
Yeah, which
Yeah.
is interesting. And so, yeah, there uh yeah, I guess I would have I guess I would have liked a little bit more than just this is his job, a little bit more of why he wants to go to the moon and what inspires him about it. And I don't know.
Yeah.
I just
I
never
suppose,
got it.
I suppose like when he's being interviewed to become an astronaut early on, he's talking about how why people will go to space and because it'll give them a new perspective on the Earth. I suppose you get a little bit of it there.
That's true.
Yeah.
So the Apollo 11 launches
Yeah.
and they arrive on the moon on the fourth day. And I didn't realize that they were running so low on fuel.
Yeah.
And if they were running so low on fuel, like how did they get back?
Well, basically, there were two separate engines. There was the lunar module came in two separate stages. The descent stage, which had the legs and the main engine they used to get down to the moon, and then the cockpit on top was the ascent stage, which would separate afterwards and use its engine to get back into orbit and find the command module. And so
Okay.
if the descent engine ran out of fuel and they had to abort, they would fire up the ascent engine and go back up into orbit.
Oh, okay. Okay. So there's a little bit of drama with where to land because
Yeah.
there's all these craters, and so he takes some manual control of the ship, trying to find this best place to land, and he's able to do it he's able to make everything work.
Yeah.
That was that was some pretty tense scenes. It was a little
Yeah.
confusing maybe at times, like what's happening, what's going on. But yeah, I mean, and it definitely looked pretty realistic as far as the moon. I mean, what do I know but what it looks like, but it seems like it would look like that.
Yeah, it did look it was a good view out of the windows where you could see how he was approaching it. It did look very convincing.
Yeah.
And it was a really tense scene, I thought, even though you knew what was going to happen. I felt it
Right.
was.
Yeah, no, I agree. It was.
Yeah.
And so yeah, they didn't really have any of that debate between Buzz Aldrin and Neil Armstrong about who goes first.
Hmm.
But and I also would have wondering, so it would have been fun to have seen a little bit more of sort of the back and forth between Houston and the spacecraft during all of this, uh, but anyway, he ends up being the first one, and we get our iconic line of one small step, and you do see some reaction for the people that are watching,
Yeah.
and seeing the whole like kind of country come together, and that was effective, and I liked it. I would have liked it more if I'd known some of these side characters, so it would have been more of a team victory. But that's not this movie. And I think that the whole like first step was done very well. Tactile, it felt very real, like you were really there, and I think that all worked really well. I liked that.
Yeah.
But I think that them not including the docking of the placement of the flag on the moon, like the reason why that became a big thing was because Ryan Gosling gave an interview where he said that the moonwalk transcended countries and borders, and that he says, I think this was widely regarded in the end as a human achievement, and that's how we chose to view it. And that's what rubbed people the wrong way, more than it not being there or being there, I think, was that quote. Because in a lot of people's eyes, for better or worse, it was a American accomplishment. It was an
Yeah.
American sacrifice.
Yeah.
It was something that people died to make happen,
Yes.
Americans. And so for him to say that, I think rubbed people the wrong way.
Yeah.
And especially because he's not even American.
He's Canadian, isn't he?
That's right.
Yeah.
And so I think, honestly, if he hadn't said that, I don't think that anyone would have cared about the actual film.
Yeah.
But him trying to take that away from us in this tense time rubbed people the wrong way.
Yeah, you kind of wonder how many people would have noticed it if nobody had mentioned it before the film came out.
Yeah, if he hadn't.
Maybe people would have thought, oh, hell, they didn't show them putting the flag out. But the way I first saw it, it was like the flag wasn't going to be there at all.
Right.
I would have had a problem with that.
Right.
Obviously, I'm not American either, but I thought it wasn't going to be such a big problem if the flag was actually there.
Yeah. I mean, it's weird because the whole movie had been about Neil Armstrong and his journey, but I felt like we were kept at a distance from him. We didn't really get to know him. But then, like, they want this landing on the moon to be this global experience where, so I think that's really strange because I don't think they earned that at all. I don't think they earned it being this global experience. And so I think it would have been better if they had him planting the flag, but had it been about him planting the flag and his experience and emotions planting the flag. And I think that would have made sense for the story. But really, I mean, like I said, it's not a huge deal. It's definitely been overblown. But I think that's why people were upset, was just because of what Gosling said more than the movie.
Okay.
That's what I think.
Well, it's possible, yeah.
Yeah.
If it's people were suggesting whether maybe this is why the film hasn't done too well at the box office.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it hasn't done that well at the box office. And I think it is a pretty long movie. There is that. But even without that, I think that this kind of movie should be something that sort of appeals to small town, the kind of people who like went to American Sniper should love this movie. And I think that it should be a grassroots kind of a thing that builds momentum. Even the same kind of people who loved like The Greatest Showman, this kind of a thing, I feel like should be the audience for this movie. But because they were turned off by this statement, then they didn't go see it. And it's a pretty art house movie, so in a way I'm not surprised that it didn't do that well, because it's just not, it's not your typical rousing blockbuster.
No, it was I think it was shown at the Venice Film Festival first, I think.
Yeah,
There's
like
a certain kind of movie that shows there.
Yeah, the kind of movie that people are going to flock to is something like your Hidden Figures, that leaves you inspired, leaves you excited. That's the kind of thing. That's not this movie.
No,
no.
I can understand it's not inspiring in the traditional sense. I found it like, I certainly find it interesting in terms of like how the kind of vision the director had for it, which was very different from what I was expecting. And how I thought I chose to portray the character of Neil Armstrong and the enigma of him. But I wouldn't call it inspiring.
Yeah,
I let you kind of take it indirectly about what everything he managed to achieve.
Yeah, and that's why I wanted to talk about it, because I did find it interesting, even if I didn't particularly like it. I made interesting choices, and I wanted more sort of insight into maybe why they made those choices. But yeah, it's an interesting film. I still think. What do you think? Would you rather watch a movie like Hidden Figures or a movie like this?
I wasn't a huge fan of Hidden Figures. I thought it was a little bit dry. I understood what they were going for, but I thought the approach was overall a little bit dry. I would rather watch Apollo 13 than this film. Yeah. Even though I really enjoyed this film, I thought Apollo 13 was a bit better overall. It was I guess it was more to appeal to a wider audience than this one was.
Yeah.
But it had so many great things about it. It had all the accuracy of recreating the space program. I really enjoyed the score in that one, and how. And you're right, it was more of an inspiring story, and it was meant to be that way.
Yeah, Apollo 13 is probably my favorite, and then I love October Sky. That's probably my second favorite of this, and then Hidden Figures, and then The Right Stuff, because it's just pretty long. That's the only thing. There's some dry parts, and and then I would say this.
Yeah, I'll probably put this one second to Apollo 13.
Oh wow! Okay.
So, and then I'll probably put the Right Stuff third.
Okay.
And then October Sky, and then Hidden Figures.
Interesting.
But maybe Hidden Figures and October Sky about even.
Okay.
I'd have to watch them both again to be sure.
Okay, good. Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know. It's one that I was hoping, but I have to say that Damien Chazelle for me always has just something missing in his characters that I just don't connect with emotionally, and that I was really hoping, because I thought I would really connect with Neil Armstrong, but I guess his personality is just different than I was expecting. Maybe that's part of my problem, but yeah, all of his films, I'm always just like, why are you like when I watched Whiplash, it was very good and I admired it, but it kept it from masterpiece level for me. And I know a lot of people just love that movie, but for me, I felt like I didn't understand why he was putting up with this insane man. Like, I needed more motivation than just he liked to listen to records sometimes. Like, I needed more. And there were a couple parts that were really over the top, like the crash in that movie was just ridiculous. And then in La La Land, I felt like I needed more from her character. We got motivation from his character about why he why he was so inspired by jazz. I never really felt like I really understood why she was so inspired by acting and what like motivated her character to like give up on this relationship in order to pursue this acting. It was just kind of like, oh, I'm a dreamer, so therefore I'm good. And I kind of, for this one, I felt like, I don't know, I just felt like I just wish that the script had done a better job of kind of allowing us to get inside his character and allowing us to really feel for him, and give him some dialogue about his dreams and what he wanted out of life. And just like, I know that he's a reserved guy, but I still feel like you can do that and have that kind of character and still flesh them out and make them interesting.
Well, they could have been a bit more open about his passions, and maybe a little bit more about his background beforehand.
Yeah.
Because he'd been working at the Air Force Base for a while. He'd actually served in the Korean War as well. He had
I didn't know that.
He was a Navy pilot for I think about a year as part of his scholarship. He had to serve in the military for a year before he finished his studies.
Interesting. Yeah, that would have been interesting.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, what did you think of the last thing? What did you think of the music? Justin Hurwitz, who did La La Land, did the score. What did you think of it?
I really liked it. It was. I think the best music came towards the end, like the music for the launch of Apollo 11 was very good, and the landing music, and probably best was like the music in the crater scene. I said before, I said before, I don't tend to cry at movies, but this is one of those times where I came quite close in that scene.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think we covered it pretty good. It's interesting. Yeah. I'm glad that we could kind of talk this out, and I could get a little more insight into Neil as a person and the whole program. And it's an interesting thing. And I think it's a movie, even though I was disappointed by it, I still would recommend people go check it out. And because it's got a lot of makes interesting choices, and I think that it's definitely worth deciding for yourself what you like about it. It's just one of those movies that something like a Blade Runner or whatever that like may not be like 100% my taste, but I still recommend people checking it out because it makes choices.
I was going to ask, did you think the bracelet scene worked well when he drops the bracelet? Did you think the scene where he drops the bracelet in the crater? Did you think that was a good scene?
It was a good scene. I didn't cry, and I am an easy cry at the movies because I just wasn't that connected to him as a character, but it was well done.
Yeah, I think there was one reviewer who thought she was just thinking of Rose dropping the heart of the ocean in the sea at the end of Titanic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, which I'm way more connected with Rose as a character by the end.
Well, it's a rather longer film.
Yeah, it is. It's true.
Yeah. I was going to say, Patty, I said there's actually evidence that he did something like that, but I wouldn't put it past him to do something like that and then not tell anybody about it.
So that was just made up?
It was speculation.
Oh, speculation.
We don't know that he did. We don't know that he didn't.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because he did kind of go for a little wander towards the crater at one point, which was unplanned because he didn't know a crater was going to be there. Yeah, and he kind of he took some pictures there officially. But if he was going to do something like leave anything on the moon, it would have been at that point. Apparently, in 2020, the contents of his the little personal kit that he took to the moon for like personal objects is going to be disclosed. So maybe we could find out then.
Oh, interesting. Was it all streamed live? Were people watching it live?
Yeah, they were. Yeah, there was a TV camera set up. Like first there was a camera inside the lunar module that showed him coming down a ladder, and then they set up a little TV camera on a pole, and it showed they broadcast the moonwalk at that point live.
It is kind of amazing when you think about it, because this is like before internet, before computers. It's before that they were able to do something like that, like beam a live broadcast from the moon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't a great picture, but it was still pretty amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. And And I guess they must have had, so were they just like waiting there in the ship for the like broadcast and stuff people to be ready? Or
Yeah, I don't think so. I think that it was about their schedule rather than the news schedule. But they were actually going a bit earlier than they planned. The original plan was for them to have a sleep period before they went outside. But Armstrong overruled that because they weren't going to sleep anyway.
right. Yeah. Interesting. All right. Well, cool. This was
Okay.
really fun.
Yeah.
I learned a lot, and it's an interesting film. So, let us know what you thought of the movie. Did you like it? Did you not like it? Or were you in the middle? Where were you at it? And I'd be curious to know. And thanks again for talking with this out with me. I really appreciate it.
It's
So
a pleasure.
where can people find you?
Well, my Twitter is RJ_Southwith. It's changed since the last videos I did.
Oh, okay.
And my blog is velociraptor256.wordpress.com, where I've also written a text review of the film.
Great. Yes, I'll have the links for that in the description section. And we will be reuniting, I guess, with Abby and Jeremy coming up in November. Fantastic Beasts and the Crimes of Grindelwald. We'll be talking about that next month. So yeah, that should be fun. All right. And you can find me at Rachel's Reviews on iTunes and on YouTube. And I'll put a link down to my review, my written review that I did of First Man. So check that out. And thanks again.
Okay.
Bye.
Yeah.